welcome to the show, Isabel. Good to have you on board again.
I can't wait to talk about this Trump press conference. It was absolutely extraordinary.
It really was, and it's got very, very serious ramifications. Now, you know, a lot of people saying, oh, what a clown. He didn't say this stuff lightly. Let's remind ourselves of what the president was relaying to the world today.
Partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite.
Stand by, Isabel. We'll have a look at his deputy, the Vice President J.D. Vance, who was echoing the theme. So take it away, Mr. Vance.
Something the president said that I think bears re-emphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means, on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C., is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job.
So what both the president and the vice president are saying here, Isabel, in their post-crash press conferences, is that the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA in America, has been hiring people not on the basis of their abilities, but on the basis of their disabilities. Now, in a job like air traffic controller, we need no ifs, no buts. It must just be a meritocracy. Never mind if they got one leg or they're a dwarf or whatever. You've got to have the best person for the job. Now, if they've been hiring people, say, never mind that guy, we've got someone with a disability here, DEI, diversity, let's hire them. I mean, that is a danger to public safety. And if this is the case, if what the president and the vice president are saying is true, this is a massive scandal, and it will wake the world up to the horror, to the madness, the insanity of woeful wokery, won't it?
Well, can we just pause just to reflect for a minute just how extraordinary this press conference was? Because it's impossible to imagine in the UK anything like this happening. It's only a matter of hours since this awful tragedy happened. And, you know, perhaps, and I'm sure the president does know much more about what really happened than he's able to say, although he did go into quite a lot of detail. But it's very early days, and the normal way for a political leader to react under these circumstances is to just content themselves with, you know, expressing condolences to the families and the relatives of those who've died and say there's going to be an investigation and so on and so forth. Trump has just gone completely nuclear on the subject of diversity and inclusion in the air traffic control towers. And we don't know yet that it is as a result of any mistake by air traffic control that this accident happened. But nonetheless, his theme seems fair enough. You know, demonstrably, there's been a terrible loss of life here, and demonstrably there's been a failure by air traffic control to stop it happening. And his whole theme is that when he was in power before, he could see that air traffic control personnel weren't good enough. You know, he thinks they need to be way above the average. They need to be geniuses, was the word that he used. And he said that Biden basically unraveled that. And as soon as he came back into office, Trump says he had begun to put measures back in place to restore the quality of air traffic control. Unfortunately, not quick enough for this to have been prevented. And, you know, I just sort of sat there jaw dropping at some of what he said. We haven't even got to the bit where he lays into the poor head of the Department for Transport in the state, a man he called a complete disaster. and went on to say that this transport chief just was very good at, and I'm quoting here, bullshit. Can you imagine a UK politician doing this?
Well, Donald Trump has just ripped up the copybook on the way politicians generally, but certainly world leaders, are supposed to behave. Over here, Keir Starmer, I wouldn't necessarily criticise him for this, but what he would have said, as you say, and other leaders would have done the same too, sympathy for the victims, you know, our thoughts are with the families, etc., etc. This was a terrible crash, and we must wait for the results of the investigation to see what's caused it. Well, you know, that's okay. We're used to that. But somehow or other, you know, this maybe sounds a bit odd, but there's something refreshing about the way Donald Trump approaches all situations. He approaches it like the rest of us. People will be talking about this. People, as he said last night or early this morning, he said, "Hang on, this accident should not have happened." There's a military helicopter, I think, with 3 military personnel aboard. You know, how come the helicopter didn't go up or down? How come it went straight towards it? So in other words, he sort of got on board the conspiracy theory wagon there. So, but this is the way people speak. And now he's zoning on DEI. Again, this is the way people speak. And frankly, I think his way of going about things is a vast improvement on the measured sort of diplomatic way that most politicians approach this sort of thing. In fact, the way they approach almost everything. I'm loving it.
I agree, because it feels so much more real, doesn't it?
Yes.
It feels like this is not just a backside covering exercise, you know, a way of trying to fob us all off, give us some platitudes, and then go away and spend years investigating, and then when everybody's forgotten because there's so many other tragedies that come in between, you know, come out with your findings. And he did actually say that today. He said, you know, normal thing would be to tell you all that we're going to have an investigation, and, you know, in several years' time we'll report back, and they will have an investigation, of course they will. But he was ready to say, well, you know what, we already know quite a bit, and here's what happened. And he was kind of, I mean, it's almost to our ears, it's so kind of radically different that it is almost funny. And of course you don't want to say it's funny because it's a really genuinely horrendous tragedy, but he was sort of saying, well, I've got a helicopter and I know how easy it is for them to go up or down or move out the way. So what exactly happened here? And I think, as you say, this is Trump's genius. It's why Trump gets so much support from so many different sections of society, because he talks like a kind of normal person. I mean, in a sense, he talks like anyone else in the pub, just wondering how on earth this thing could have happened, and not trying to do any number of verbal gymnastics to avoid telling us what he's really thinking. He's just laying it all out there, isn't he?
And he's used, absolutely, and he's, as I say, he's ripped up the copybook on the way world leaders, senior politicians are supposed to behave. I've seen a lot of journalists from the political lobbies here in Westminster. You know, they're disgusted and shocked because he does not conform to the way they expect politicians to behave. And the rest of us are saying, thank God for that. Hallelujah. We've had enough of your, you know, deflective nonsense. And he's getting to the heart of the matter now. He's already talking about, by the way, sadly, this was, of course, a American airline that was hit by a helicopter, and both vessels, I think, plunged into the Potomac River. Officials have now confirmed that there are no survivors, so I do believe the death count, sadly, is 67. So they're confirming that, but it's good. It's good because people, and we've seen the haunting pictures. You can see it from the air traffic control tower. They've got it on film of when you're looking at it now. You can see it, and there it goes. This is the helicopter crashing straight into it. And I do think it's strange. I do think it's strange that happened. You'd have thought, you know, the joystick, you go up or down. Weren't they looking? And wasn't the helicopter looking? But yes, Trump is now talking about this crash being caused, as far as he can work out, by a confluence of bad decisions, and this is a confluence of bad decisions that he believes may have been made by air traffic controllers who were not the best qualified people to do the job. As I said earlier, they were people that he believes were hired for their disabilities rather than their abilities. And if that is true, as I said earlier, that is a massive scandal, isn't it?
Absolutely is. You know, when I first started out as a political journalist many years ago, I had to learn a whole new language, really. It's the language of deflection, as you said, and it was learning about how to interpret what politicians really meant by what they didn't say, or the phrases they used to avoid answering the question. The joy with Trump is you don't have to do that. You know, most people don't know how to interpret political speak, but with Trump, you don't have to try, because he's just saying it straight, just as it is. And I'm sure it'll take a while before we know exactly who failed and how and why. But Trump is just on a campaign. He's on a mission to end this DEI nonsense. And I think so many of us can just get fully on board with that. And if this awful tragedy helps to that end, then all the better.
Yeah, you're right. He's speaking to the people, as opposed to congressmen and senators. And I think that's a fantastic development. Maybe it will set the die for future presidents. You never know. Now, I did want to get you, let's quickly talk about this. We've got to move on in just a second. But meanwhile, before this horrible tragedy, he was continuing his textbook lesson in how to tackle America's migrant crisis. You know, first you stop saying that illegal migrants are not criminals. They crossed the border without documents. They broke into the country. That's against the law. They are all criminals. And some of them, as we know, quite a few of them are a lot worse than that. You know, murderers, rapists, drug dealers, and so on and so forth. He started the mass deportations. And now he signed another one of his executive orders aimed at sending 30,000 of, to quote him, the worst criminal illegal aliens to be caged in Guantanamo Bay, where apparently they have 30,000 spare beds. This is on Cuba, of course. And this privilege will be reserved for crooks that he said are so bad we don't even trust their countries to hold them. So what he's saying is if they deport them back to their country, he fears they'll escape and get back to America. So rather than risk that, he's just going to lock them up in Guantanamo Bay. And he added, it's a tough place to get out of. I mean, this is a hard-line way of tackling their migrant crisis. And frankly, it's good to see.
It is. I mean, this strategy of deterrence works. We know this because other countries have been able to achieve it. There are countries which have virtually zero illegal immigration as a result of sending out the message that if you do this, you will be treated as a criminal. If you sneak and try to sneak into our country or overstay your visa, we're just going to lock you up or deport you immediately. The UK routinely does none of those things. We just let people slip into just melt into society. And as a result, you know, we've got 1 in 12 people in London who are illegal immigrants, and the whole economy is being distorted by this crisis. So I would love to see a similar super hardline approach to this in the UK. And you know what? I think a majority of the population is in favour of that. They're not going to get it with this government. I know we're going to talk a bit further about that.
Yeah, we will later, yeah.
And things are going to build and build, and there is going to be an absolute outpouring of fury from voters next time they have the opportunity to express it.
I mean, Australia started this, a very logical process. They basically said, look, you come to our country in an illegal vessel, and you try to break in through our borders. You ignore border control. You've just broken our laws. And then you apply for asylum. No. You can't have asylum because you've broken our laws. You're a criminal. Now, the brilliant Caroline Levitt Donald Trump's new head of communications in the White House, just 27 years old, but a wise head on young shoulders. She was quizzed in the White House by that supine lot of Washington reporters. Somebody said, one of these reporters said, but Ms. Caroline, you know, these people are not criminals. She went, no, that has changed. Joe Biden used to say that. We don't. She says, you break into our country, you come across our border illegally, you're a criminal, end of, and we deport you. We could do that in this country, but as you say, the trouble is we have a prime minister and a cabinet and a government who don't want to solve the migrant crisis. They like migrants coming here.